Can you hear okay?
Down, down with Mubarak!
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 One solution!
Revolution!
One solution!
Revolution!
One solution!
Revolution!
First of all, it's fantastic that we've joined together the people demonstrating against cuts in Britain and the people demonstrating against the dictatorship imposing ferocious, terrible conditions on the people in Egypt and across the Arab world. We are witnessing the beginning of a pan-Arabic revolutionary movement of the oppressed and the poor. The image we've been given in Britain is that all Arabic people are Muslim fundamentalists. This lie, backed up by American imperialism, is intended to divide the people of the Arab world from the people of Europe, the ordinary people of America, and the ordinary people, working people, and poor, and the rest of the world. But we are witnessing the uprising of the Arab people at the beginning of a worldwide movement of transformation, which we are all united together to bring together social justice, rights for the poor, and democratic control of society and the economic resources of the planet. Victory to the Egyptian and the Arab Revolution.
We won't give up, we won't give up.
We won't give up, we won't give in!
Until we see our people win.
Until we see our people win!
We won't give up, we won't give in.
We won't give up, we won't give in!
Until we see our people win.
In general, Marxists will argue that the revolutionary movement itself that is developing on the streets must create its own organs of power. What's the most likely course of development? If you look at what's happening this morning or this afternoon in Egypt, you look at the images that are available on the television. What is it? It's masses of people sitting on tanks. So in other words, the capacity is there to overthrow the regime because the tanks only have to be driven to seize the key buildings, and the soldiers already declaring their solidarity with people and discussing with people. This is a classical revolution.
Yes.
However, what means can this revolution have to bring about this transition? Either it would be that leading layers in the state, as was the case in Tunisia, the army decided, the leadership of the army, it appears anyway, decided to remove Ben Ali. Off he goes to Saudi Arabia via France. Then with Mubarak, what do we have?
3 generals.
He is appointed, the generals have officially declared their loyalty to Mubarak.
But they are arguing for his removal now.
Now, of course, this was a couple of days ago, because they didn't know how the demonstration would develop. Basically, they turn around to Mubarak, they have a meeting with him every day. They turn around to him and they say, if you can hold it today, and there aren't too many people on the streets, we'll allow you to stay in power. But we're warning you, by 10 o'clock tomorrow, we want another meeting. And what happened was, of course, was on Friday, the demonstrations escalated, and then yesterday the demonstrations reached a point, and today, where it's clearly an unstoppable revolutionary process. And so what will happen is that the generals are going to fear that lower ranking officers in the army who are close to the people and linked into the ordinary soldiers to be able to give commands to lower level soldiers, that they will turn against the leadership of the army itself, because the leadership of the army is interlinked with Mubarak and the entire elite of crookery and theft that has ruled for 30 years over Egypt, and has made an alliance with Israel and the United States of America, trained, armed, organized by America. That's why the Americans are talking, why Barack Obama, the man of oratory, is talking so much crap at the moment about what's going on in Egypt. He turns around and says, I mean, imagine, there's a
1.5 billion
state,
of military aid a year.
there's a state shooting unarmed demonstrators in the head, and Barack Obama says, please, no violence from the protesters. What are they doing? Smashing their heads against bullets? This is the way in which Barack Obama's arguing. Utterly absurd. But it reveals a cleft, a giant cleft opening up between official versions of reality and the reality developing from the base of society. And in that sense, it's important to understand that what is happening in Egypt and Tunisia is the same process of change that is happening in Western Europe as well. We've seen protest demonstrations in France, general strikes in France, in Spain, in Greece, in Italy, in Portugal, all in the course of 1 year. Now there are mass demonstrations have broken out in Britain, in Ireland. There is an global economic crisis that has provoked this explosion in the Middle East. And this explosion in the Middle East, the beauty about it is it debunks all the lies that we've been told since September the 11th about the character of the people of the Middle East. We were told since that time, it was inculcated into the general minds of the population that the people of the Middle East are Islamic fundamentalists. They're all screaming for an Islamic state which will impose a tyranny on the peoples, not only of their own countries, but of the whole of the world if they got their way. Instead of this, what we've seen in the last 4 weeks, in Tunisia and Egypt, and then it will follow in other countries. There were demonstrations in Jordan the last couple of days.
Yemen.
There are demonstrations in Yemen. There will be revolts in Morocco and maybe even in Saudi Arabia. And what we are seeing is the binding together of the social and economic protests of the mass of people of North Africa and the Middle East coming together in the sense that they are fighting for the same issues as people in Western Europe and Northern Europe are fighting for. Social and economic rights. But combined with this in the Middle East is the struggle for political representation. Political representation. Of course, we have a similar problem in the West as well, in that our political representation, ossified structures from 150 years ago, basically do not really represent the people. They stand for the elite, for the rich, for the powerful, for the wealthy, for the landed estates, for the bankers, the big business people. So too it is in Egypt, so it is in Tunisia, so it is in Saudi Arabia, and by the way, in each of these countries, the dictators, now the word dictator is used, don't forget. The BBC uses it, CNN uses it, ITV uses it, the Times and the Guardian use it. The dictator Mubarak, the dictator Ben Ali. But only a few weeks ago, these were rock solid allies of the West. Rock solid allies. And only when a revolutionary movement of the people takes to the streets and threatens to topple the regime, do they suddenly come out and say, oh, there must be change now. But they don't say the change must be a revolution from below, supported by us, by our governments, who have armed, trained and organised the dictators in Egypt and Tunisia and elsewhere. They don't say that we've made a mistake by backing, training, arming and organising the repression of the people of these countries. No, they turn around and say Mubarak himself must bring about the change.
From a government.
He must enlighten himself, change governments. He was probably advised. Barack Obama said on television, because it's easier for a politician like Barack Obama to tell a white lie than a direct lie. So what he says is, I spoke to Mubarak after his speech. What he means is, he spoke to Mubarak before his speech.
Exactly. What to say.
Before his speech, and told him what to say. Yesterday I was at the demonstration outside the Egyptian embassy across the road here. someone had a good placard. It says, vacancy, President of Egypt, apply to Washington. Apply to Washington.
Well said, well said.
And that, of course, is what the game has been, right since NASA. When NASA nationalised the Suez Canal in the 1950s, what did the British do? Don't forget, Britain has a long historical connection with the plundering and theft of Egypt. Since the 1880s, I believe, 1880s until the 1950s, Britain controlled the population of Egypt and plundered the country.
It's not possible, you know that. People could think for themselves.
In the 1950s, when NASA nationalised the Suez Canal, the British sent in warplanes with the French and bombed the people. Then the Israelis were sent in. Then, of course, the Americans cleared up and made their deal with Israel. So this murky history that we've lived through, of brutality and violence against the people of the Middle East, in which solace was found in religion in some places. Solace was found in religion. Now we're seeing an uprising caused by the new demographic transformation of the Middle East. Young people, educated people, industrial and urban people. These people are the same as people in Europe. In fact, Cairo has a population, something like 18 million. 18 million. Larger than any city in Western Europe. So in other words, what we're seeing is part of the urbanization and industrialization of Africa and the so-called third world countries. And naturally, working people in these countries respond and act in similar ways to the emergence of the working class movements in Europe in the past. In the 1850s to 1950, the working classes of Europe emerged as a social force, demanding their rights, demanding democracy, the right to strike, the right to organise, the right to demonstrate. That is what you're seeing develop in the Middle East today. And the European countries, supposed, and America, supposed homelands of democracy, are instrumental in maintaining the dictatorships in these countries. That is why it is our responsibility here in Europe, as the student demonstration which I joined yesterday did, join up with the people from Egypt in demonstrating against the rulers of this country, and join up with the people of the Middle East in the same social and economic struggle to overthrow the system of capitalism on a world scale, controlled by banks, big industries, which dominate the control of the world.
It's very funny.
What is the... Well, the gentleman laughs. Why does he laugh? He thinks there's a leap between raising the question of capitalism and the revolution in Egypt.
They don't care.
Wait. Tell me.
America's the perfect example.
Perfect example of what? Hypocrisy.
Yes, of course. Democracy and
Hypocrisy, I said, not democracy.
I would both are universal.
Sorry?
For people of the Middle East, for people of South America, for the people of the American
universal.
colonies.
But my friend, why is it not a universal then? Why is it a universal truth
I believe
that the United... Why is it a universal truth that the United States, land of the free, maintains tyrannies with their own finance, arming, training, intelligence services across the whole of the Middle East? Why? Because American economic prosperity for 50 years has been based upon the American dollar being backed by black gold from the blood and sweat of the mass of the Arab people and plundering the resources of that region.
And the Persian
United
ones too.
States
And
is
the Persian
largely
ones too. Remember
financed by Arab wealth, which gets transferred to support American bonds. And the rulers of these countries, who claim to be so holy and Islamic, like the rulers of Saudi Arabia, they are the people who hang around in the Edgware Road here. Mubarak's son, I understand, arrived in London this morning or yesterday.
Yesterday, yes.
In London.
He's British.
So while Cameron turns around and says, behave yourself, Mubarak, at the same time he says, and send your son here with the money.